All right, hey everyone, welcome to another deep dive. I'm Nick, and today we have with us Michael Bentley, and he is with Euler? That's what you just said.
Yeah, a lot of people say Euler, which is obviously how it looks. So Euler's the name of a Swiss mathematician, perhaps one of the greatest mathematicians that ever lived. And that's how that's how it was pronounced apparently.
Oh, cool.
The re the re the reason it's named after this mathematician, by the way, is that Euler was studied the compound interest rate formula, which of course is very important if you're in the
Right.
business of assisting lending and borrowing of assets. And of course, Compound got the best name. They were first to market and had the best name, so we went
Oh,
with we went with the name of the mathematician that was interested in this stuff.
it's okay. I think I got your logo right.
That's spot on.
Yeah. No, I think. How long have you been doing this for? When did you sort of start the company and yeah.
Yeah, so it goes back quite a while now. Actually, right at the start of the pandemic, back in let's see, yeah, March, April 2020. I was an academic at the time, and my wife was heavily pregnant with my daughter.
It's a great time for
And
a startup, right?
exactly right. Well, she was going to bed. She was going to bed quite early. So I was staying up on an evening, and at the time, you can cast your mind back to that period. There was quite a lot of excitement. The market was a little depressed, obviously, in 2019 and so on, but there's a lot, the kind of foundation of DeFi summer was bubbling away at that point. Compound was exciting people. Uniswap was getting going. PineCo was around, and so on. So there's stuff going on, and I was spending my evening looking at this kind of stuff, doing research and trying to build better models, or what I felt would be better models for the way that interest rates get set in DeFi protocols. And yeah, that led me to enter this as a kind of hack in a hackathon, and ended up winning the prize for the hackathon. And a few months later, the Euler company was formed, and we started building the foundation for the MVP of Euler lending protocol.
Cool. And when did you guys launch?
Well, the protocol was deployed on mainnet in December last year, so it's almost exactly a year old.
Congrats. Happy birthday.
And thank you very much. Yeah, it's been a fairly ordinary year. I think we can all agree. Not too much going on. No, it's there's been a lot of turbulence, a lot of hazards, and what's really nice is that, of course, Euler, like a lot of DeFi, has managed to sustain itself and tackle this very hazardous period with grace, I think. And so all these risk mitigation things that we built into the protocol have kind of proved their worth. Yeah,
Sure.
so I'm kind of proud and happy, and very pleased that things have gone well over the past year.
Yeah. Anything, but before we get started, and then I'll ask you sort of similar question at the end, like anything you would have done differently starting the company if you could go back now?
Good question. It's always hard, right? Because yeah, in retrospect, of course, at the time you don't have the future in your mind, so you don't know. I think Euler's had a very technical team to begin with, and we didn't have a lot of people with a kind of business go-to-market kind of mindset, and so perhaps that would have been something that we would have worked on, as better communication, better sort of establishment of a community interest, that kind of thing in the project. Because when we talk to people, eventually when we get around to talking to people, they do get very excited about what we've built, but a lot of the time they haven't even heard of us in the first place. So yeah, better communication and kind of branding, marketing, that kind of thing, maybe.
Yeah, well, I mean, definitely you guys picked a market winner as far as like lending protocols are still really hot. And you guys, did you guys raise money?
Several times. The project's raised money. So the Euler Labs company, who are the developers of the protocol, we had a seed round raised back in September 2020. Then we raised more money in, I think, June 2021. Paradigm were the lead investor in that round. Then I think in July this year, the DAO did a treasury diversification event that raised quite a large sum of money. So there's 32 million, I think, put into the DAO treasury in return for governance tokens, and that was led by Horn Ventures.
So you guys have a governance token, and then obviously a
do,
lot of
yeah.
tokens associated with the system as well.
That's right. Yeah, there's a protocol native governance token called EUL that helps manage things. The DAO's in a kind of nascent state, building up, developing. Obviously, Euler Labs still helping to cultivate the seeds of decentralization there. But it's been going really well. I mean, the DAO is the governance forum is extremely active. We have a lot of proactive participants aside from the Euler Labs company. So it's been flourishing actually, despite the depressed market, which has been good.
Cool. Yeah, we'll have to chat DAO mechanics some other time, but
Yeah, indeed.
you know, we can yeah, we'll just kind of draw an overview of the picture, and then we can just I guess we'll just start there, and then we'll see where the questions go.
Sure, sounds good.
So I guess who would, you know, what would be the user? So, you know, the actual end user. We'll start with them. They want to do X. I guess it would be borrow something or short a currency would probably be a good one.
Yeah, I think well, there are really you know in this protocol uniquely there are definitely two types of users, right? That are very kind of have different interests.
Yep.
There are the borrowers, which in some sense are the kind of most important user because they're the one that's actually seeking some real kind of economic utility. The borrowers tend to be fairly small in number. They tend to have a lot of assets. They're crypto native often. They're often institutional sort of grade or whale, historical whale crypto holders and so on. And they're using lending protocols almost exclusively these days for trading assets. There are some types of borrowers which borrow against their volatile assets stable coins, which they can then take back into the real world for a variety of reasons. So people do this with Bitcoin. They want to hold their Bitcoin, but they also want to buy a house or pay for something in the real world. So they'll deposit their Bitcoin as collateral, borrow USDC, for example, and then take that into the real world to do something.
So let's for the scenario here, let's say this guy he has a whole bunch of ETH over here.
Yeah.
And then he has a big bag of ETH. And he wants USDC to go buy a house, right? That could be a scenario.
That's one scenario, yeah.
Okay. So what would he do? How would he do this? I guess walk me through. Should we draw the other guy yet, or should we have him deposit it in?
Let's do if we call him Bob, and then let's do Alice. We'll make Alice the lender.
Okay, yeah. Alice the lender. We'll put her over here. We'll draw her more svelte. Okay, Alice the lender, and she has a bunch of USDC, right?
She's got a bunch of USDC.
Okay, cool.
And she's it's not productive, right? In and of itself, it's actually losing value relative to inflation and everything and so on. So she'd like to make it productive and earn on the time value of that asset, and so she can deposit the USDC into Euler into a pool, which allows it then to be lent out to Bob and other borrowers.
Cool. So she'll loan it here, and then so she deposits USDC, and then he would deposit his ETH in here, and get the USDC. So he puts ETH in, and he gets USDC out, right?
That's
correct. She would get out a pool token?
She gets a pool token, which denominates this pool token says what's her share of the total pool of USDC at any time.
Right. So if there's a whole bunch of other ones, she has 5%, 10%.
Exactly.
Right. And then I guess the question would be, how much ETH did he have to deposit to? So, if let's say he wanted 100K USDC, how much ETH would he have had to put in?
Good question. Yeah, the system is always over collateralized. It's a very common mechanism for DeFi protocols, especially. Yep. So he'd need to put in, let's say, 120K worth of ETH.
Cool. Is that fixed as far as it's a 20% thing, or is that a variable that somebody gets to pick?
So on Euler, there are two parameters that dictate this kind of ratio. If you were to take the ratio of those two things, 120 to 100K, you would get in fact, the other way around, you would get what's called the loan to value of the loan. So you'd take 100K divided by 120, and that would give you what's called this loan to value ratio. Now, two parameters on Euler determine how much Bob can borrow here. One is the collateral factor of ETH, which is a number between 0 and 1. For the sake of argument, let's call it 0.9.
So collateral ratio, you said?
Collateral factor.
Collateral factor. Okay.
Yeah.
And then
let's say that value is 0.9.
And what is what does that mean? I guess just how good of collateral it is, basically.
So I'll tell you what it does first, and then how you would what it kind of means. So what it does is it kind of devalues the amount the kind of collateral that you have. So if you have 120K, you'd put in and do times that 0.9 to get some kind of other value. My mental maths is terrible, so I won't try to guess what that is, but like 108K or whatever, right? So essentially it's kind of devaluing the collateral by some amount, and that will provide a buffer that we'll talk about in a moment, to make sure that the system's over collateralized at all times.
Yep.
Where does it come from? What does it mean? Essentially, it's somewhat reflective of the kind of quality of the asset with respect to the asset's liquidity and its volatility.
And who would set that? Is this automatic, or would this be like just sort of hard coded in once you deploy?
Good question. This is a governance set parameter on Euler, so people have to vote to determine what they think is a safe and sensible collateral factor.
Cool. Yeah. No, I mean, for people listening, this is they do this in basically like if you're posting margin and other assets in TradFi, like they would haircut your margin as well, various factors. So this is something that's there as well. So, but cool. So you guys are the regulators.
That's it. Indeed.
Yeah.
Then, so if we move on to this other factor, this is a unique factor to Euler, in which distinguishes it from other protocols like Compound and Aave. There's also a borrow factor.
Okay.
And this is associated with USDC.
This is just associated with USDC?
Yeah. So every asset on Euler has both a collateral factor and a borrow factor.
Okay.
But in this case, we care about the asset being borrowed, which is USDC. This, like the collateral factor, kind of represents the volatility and liquidity of the asset. But it has the opposite effect of the collateral factor. What this is going to do is actually increase the value of the liability being borrowed.
Of this one. So
indeed.
Yeah. Well, either way, it'll lower the collateralization ratio in here, right? Yeah.
Indeed. Yeah. So if you in this case, we need to actually divide 100K by 0.9.
So we'll assume the borrow factor is also 0.9.
Yeah. Let's say, yeah, indeed. Let's assume it's the same. And now we divide it and we're going to get something like 111K.
Okay.
So what's interesting here, right, is that we're now saying that the collateral, we call it the risk-adjusted collateral value, I think we said was 108K. And in this example, with these numbers, we're saying that the risk-adjusted liability is going to be 111K. And so actually, we've kind of started in a state that's not properly.
So you would probably want to push this up to like 130 or something.
Let's do that. Yeah. Make sure they're fully collateralized to begin with. Exactly.
We won't start in a bad place.
Yeah.
Cool.
Because this is important for what happens next, I suppose, right? When market prices move and so on. So we'll come to that.
And then I guess the other question would be, I'm just spit.
Yeah.
Or I guess we can get to, does it take into account at all? Like, wouldn't it be like, this is probably a question for later, but if he takes the USDC and then cycles it back through 1,000 times, like you could like leverage it up, right? Would that increase the riskiness of this whole thing?
Well,
or not necessarily, or would that be reflected here in borrow factor?
No, in fact, it's not. The system in DeFi is generally configured such that at that point you can think of it as an entirely new
Okay,
process. Like what the user would usually do, depending on if they want to go long or short. We can come to why this sets up this kind of position. But if Bob was to sort of sell his USDC now for more ETH,
right.
so he borrows 100k USDC, he swaps it then for 100k ETH. He
Deposits it
can
back in. Yeah.
and then he's going to be able to borrow because the collateral factor's there, right? He'll now be able to borrow a bit less, so he'll maybe borrow 80k worth of ETH, and then he'll get let's say $72,000 worth of USDC. So he takes that, he swaps it back for more ETH, he redeposits, borrows. He
This
can
is
loop this process around as many times as he likes, but at some point, note that each time he loops, the amount that he's borrowing and depositing gets a little smaller, right?
this is like the basic, what is it, fractional reserve banking lesson you learn in college, right? Where you, if you have like a 10% reserve requirement and then the bank loans it out and it's slowly less and less, and you have like, so I guess it would be like what? If you have like a 10% over collateralization, you would like eventually end up with like 10x or something like that.
Yeah, you could maybe get
Yeah,
to some 8, 9, 10x up to that kind of level.
right.
I wouldn't describe it as fractional reserve because notice that on each loop of the loan, every single loop is itself over collateralized.
Sure.
So you asked an interesting question of does this increase risk? And I would say yes, to some degree it does. For any individual, the extra risk is kind of minimal. You can imagine that in some sense you've turned one user into 8 independent users in the system, right?
I guess the big risk would be that just that the TVL could quickly drop in a scenario because they're all sort of tied together.
Yeah, it's like 8 users that have all, in some sense, taken on the same strategy. And
Right.
so if the markets turn against them, they're all in trouble at once here. And the caveat, the reason I say it does increase risk sort of systemically is that if lots of users do this, then when we have to unwind this position, and we'll come to that in a moment, I guess. When you have to unwind this through a process of liquidation, what's going to have to happen is that Bob's collateral here, this ETH, is going to need to be sold to repay the USDC loan. And during that process, if he's looped many times, then that involves selling more ETH for USDC. And of course, the more you do that, the more the price of ETH drops, which itself puts him at greater risk. And so, the more Bob loops, the more leveraged he becomes. Essentially, the more he stands to lose during liquidations, and the more systemic risk he poses to the entire financial ecosystem through lending protocols. Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, I mean, let's move over to liquidations then. I think that's next, right?
Yeah.
It would be so we have $130,000 worth of ETH, and he took out this, and then the price of ETH drops to 90K, or quickly drops to 99K. We'll assume it's, or would it not drop all the way there? You would try and liquidate it before it got under collateralized. Where do you hit
Indeed. Yeah. So ideally, when we talked about this kind of loan to value buffer, ideally there's some kind of buffer of over collateralization. The reason that exists is to accommodate price changes in the market and to accommodate a process of liquidation. When you liquidate, you essentially Bob will need to sell this ETH in order to buy USDC and repay this loan. Now, he won't do that himself. Somebody's going to do that on his behalf. So he will, by force, somebody will essentially sell his collateral on his behalf and buy back the assets that he's borrowed to repay his loan on his behalf.
Someone would come, this guy would be Liquidator Larry. He would come and he would take that 130K ETH. He would go over here, sell ETH, pay back USDC, right? And then he would get paid some reward for doing that. in the system.
Exactly. So Larry's not an altruist or an effective altruist for that matter. He's not doing this because he likes Euler. He's doing it for purely self-interested reasons. What Larry the reason Larry benefits from this process is that when he sells his collateral, when he sells Bob's collateral, he's actually going to take a little cut from that. He's essentially going to get a little bonus on top. Which means if providing the bonus is large enough to cover his costs, which would be gas fees and maybe exchange fees on Uniswap and operating costs for running bots and computers and the time he spent developing this. Once it's enough, he's happy to kind of do this and to make a profit.
Cool.
There's a unique system on Euler here that is worth taking a moment to spell out that distinguishes it from compound and Aave. Usually this bonus that the liquidator gets is a fixed percentage of the collateral being liquidated. So it might be something like 5% or 10% of the value of the collateral being sold off. That's the kind of status quo on other lending protocols. That's actually really effective for lots of loan sizes, but it's really, really poor mechanism when you have people taking out very large loans, because essentially when you're liquidating, let's say, $1 million of a loan, you're then rewarding the liquidator with 50 to 100K worth of collateral, which is in any scenario more than enough. It's way more than
he'll do it for more than $500.
Right, indeed. So why do we need this much?
So no fixed percentage in your life.
Indeed, in the Euler ecosystem, the percentage essentially starts at 0, the bonus, and it rises as Bob's position changes in kind of health.
Nice.
And what this means is that the market then gets a voice in at what point should somebody be liquidated. If you're borrowing lots and lots of assets, typically the bonus that gets paid is 1% or less. And if you're a small,
Yeah, we have a similar thing in the Teller Oracle where we call it time-based rewards, where it like starts at 0 and it goes up, and then whoever basically it's like slightly over the gas costs. And
exactly, yeah.
Yep.
I think there's lots of theory on this, right? And these kind of like quasi Dutch auction mechanisms, people are kind of front running one another to take smaller and smaller bonuses until the bonus approaches the kind of marginal cost of their process. So it should bring things down dramatically. Economics
for the win. And I guess back to the Oracle question, where do you guys get the price here of that ETH, I guess would be in this scenario, or I guess in all of your, you use anybody can start any asset, right?
Indeed, yeah. We first developed the protocol to use Uniswap v3 price oracles.
Okay.
Now, they are quite interesting. They work quite differently to other oracle systems.
So we had Torgen, if you know Torgen, he wrote a research. He was on like a month ago, so he decimated Uni for an hour.
So his paper was largely on Uni v2 oracles, and I also wrote a paper on Uni v3 oracles.
Yep. I can link.
Please do. Yeah, I'll send it over. So they do have quite different properties, although I think he's right to kind of be skeptical about Uni v3 oracles, particularly after the merge happened. These oracle types became cheaper to attack by people who would seek to manipulate the price than they once were before, when Ethereum was a proof of work network. There are complex reasons for that, which he may have gone into, but for sure. So today, actually, Euler supports many different oracle types, although it's principally using 2 right now. For most of the larger, more liquid assets, Euler currently uses Chainlink oracles.
Cool. Link, so you let people choose when they're deploying the pool, I would assume?
In fact, no. Actually, when people right now, this system probably needs an upgrade, in my opinion. But essentially, when somebody deploys a new pool, by default, it will always use the Uni v3 oracle.
Okay.
And then on the Euler Finance website, you will then be told how secure is this pool. And so for Uni v3 pools, generally the oracles are regarded as less secure, especially after the merge.
So then how did you guys have do you guys have upgradability in these pools? Did you like change the oracles with governance?
Indeed, yeah. Governance
Okay.
voted back in essentially the month before the merge. When was that? It feels like forever ago, but
I know, right?
it's probably like a few weeks ago. Essentially, a new module was built, a new modular structure around price oracles was built within the Euler smart contracts to enable people to transition a given market to a different oracle type. So in principle, it could use Teller, it could use Chainlink, it could use something else.
Cool.
Yeah, but all oracles today at least start with Uni v3, and then off-chain risk metrics are used to advise users on whether or not, on the Euler Finance website at least, on whether or not those kind of oracles are structurally safe or not.
All right. Well, I'll reach out.
Yeah.
We'll put in a governance proposal. Okay.
You should. I mean,
we tend to take link scraps, so I'm sure you know they don't put, they tend to not put coins up that readily.
Yeah.
So
indeed, this was part of the issue we had when we started the project, was we wanted a system that supported a very diverse set of assets, and of course Chainlink, have been great in securing markets across Compound, Aave, plenty of DeFi protocols for a few years now, but the support is still limited to only the most liquid assets. Indeed.
Yeah. So no, it's pros and cons, obviously. But
course,
I mean, are you guys on multiple networks?
No, Euler's currently deployed only to Ethereum.
Only to Ethereum, all right.
Only to Ethereum. There's been murmurs in the DAO kind of asking for deployments to other networks, but I think oracles themselves are interesting on other networks. I'm sure you've covered this in other talks, but when you're providing the price for something, it really should, in my opinion, usually be the price of that thing. And in many cases, we've seen issues on other networks where people end up pricing with, a derivative asset, right? So they'll take USDC on some bridge. They'll take the bridge USDC and price it using Ethereum USDC, which is very dangerous because they're not the same thing.
To be fair, USDC is a derivative asset as well. So
of course, indeed, yeah. So you have real issues, I think, on these networks, and it takes a lot of work to do this in a safe and secure manner. But I get the urge to kind of just to deploy everywhere where there's kind of sources of liquidity. But,
well, you're starting to see, I mean, you are starting to see, more and more tokens just natively deployed on Polygon or some other network. Yeah. So, like we're almost there to where like people aren't even going to bother with Ethereum except for, like roll-up validation. So
yeah, that's true.
But next bull market when we're all priced out, I guess.
Yeah. I am really excited about layer 2 technology, and definitely would like to see Euler deployed on other networks and roll-ups and in other places. But I think it's something not to rush, and it's something that has a lot more risk associated with than some people sometimes make out. So
yeah. Well, I know I only have you for a few more minutes. What would sort of be, what are we missing anything important in the system? I know we have governance we could maybe go over quick, but anything else?
Yeah, I would say in general, Euler's being built with high performance in mind for people trading. So a whole bunch of other kind of features here that help manage risks and isolate risks. So Euler has probably the most conservative set of parameters with respect to collateral on the system, and also has this notion of asset tiers where some assets can't be used as collateral, some assets can't be borrowed in a cross-margin environment.
Cool.
Euler is also the let's see, let me just reel off a few things. The cheapest place to obtain flash loans in DeFi on Ethereum, at least. It offers feeless flash loans, which is not unique by itself, but also the process of taking a flash loan is the cheapest in terms of gas on anywhere in the ecosystem. Nice. So these are quite interesting features that allow people to rebalance positions, do other kind of advanced trading activity in the ecosystem. Right, you can borrow an asset for essentially 0 seconds, and repay it within the same transaction atomically.
Cool. And then for your governance, is this token weighted? And then do you snapshot?
Yeah, I'm interested in the development of governance. I don't.
Yep.
My personal view is that the current systems don't work very well. That's been my experience, just helping kind of see the foundations of a DAO. It's a very clunky process, and it's clear that if we want to have protocols that are capital efficient in DeFi and kind of useful for people, then they need to be upgradable in some sense. They need to be adaptable. They need to change as the ecosystem changes, as liquidity changes on the markets and so on. And so for that, you definitely need governance. But then the question is, should you have every token holder vote on every little governance change? Are people educated enough about the risks and the types of issues involved in setting something like a collateral or a borrow factor? I don't think so. But then, of course, when you then you start to centralize the system, right? You say, oh, well, can we just have some special like risk DAO that looks after this, and then that gives those parties quite a lot of power. So personally, I think
we had a DAO for 2 years, and we recently just like unDAOified and just like we just made all the contracts non-upgradable and made it so if you want to move things, you move things, and then it's sort of opt-in model.
Yeah.
But it's super tough. So.
Yeah, the immutable contracts are definitely, I think they work really well for some things, and but not in the case of lending. I'm very skeptical about immutable contracts. Although Euler has some new things coming out in the new year, which I think will be interesting. We'll probably follow that model a little more.
Yeah, for sure. Well, like the hard part would just be, you want to make it so it's opt-in upgrades, but then it's also not too expensive to keep the old version running on your own, so you don't screw people over if you upgrade, or large liquidity providers go, which was the problem. Like, I don't know, you guys probably dealt with, the Uni V2 to V3 Oracle switch, which, screwed a lot of people over.
Yeah, I think anytime you have to deploy a separate contract, the movement of liquidity, people always get caught out with this. See it time and time again, and so it's not very efficient. It's an unfortunate way to manage things, but then it does definitely help harden and decentralize protocols. So it really depends what your tolerance is for centralization and efficiency. What do you optimize for? You can't always do both at once, and I think that it's fine to accept that, and for the market to kind of choose what it wants. And of course, then there's this whole other branch about regulation and how things should be regulated, which not worth getting into here. But of course, that impacts on how teams develop these things. So
so I mean, you're obviously a derivative. So this is
well, actually, I think technically these things aren't derivatives, but that's again another conversation.
I know. No, but this was super fun. I'll be conscious of your time and not pull you over too bad. So any sort of final thoughts? This was a great overview of the lending protocol. This looks like a lot of lending protocols, but I think you sort of pointed out some of the things that make Euler a little bit different, and definitely worth taking a look.
Yeah, there's a lot of features we haven't discussed here that is kind of like the foundations, which I agree are kind of similar across lending protocols today. A couple of things just to highlight that are coming out in next year that might be worth a second call. One is Euler Swap, which is a new decentralized exchange with a new type of Oracle embedded within it. And I definitely love to talk to you about Oracle design and that kind of stuff. And then the second one is an extension or a wrapper around Euler itself that will enable the creation of more permissionless collateral markets in a really risk managed environment. So that was quite a big change to the way that things work, I think, for DeFi.
Cool. And where can people go to find out more information?
Check out Euler.finance or at Euler Finance on Twitter. I think they're the two best places to get more information.
Cool. Yeah. Well, this was definitely way too brief. We'll have to next time we'll just like talk oracles and super nuanced stuff for an hour.
Yeah,
But
definitely.
yeah, thank you so much for coming and yeah. See you.
Thank you for having me.